Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. You are listening to episode number 47. I'm Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here, as always, with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, how you doing tonight?
Well, I don't know how you let me do it in 2024, but I'm making Spencer talk about Jason Kidd and Jabari Parker today, which somehow ties into our episode tonight, which is going to make Spencer have his night be ruined. So you guys should all be thanking me after listening to this one.
Sounds like you should be thanking me for putting up with it, if we're thanking anyone. Um, yeah, this is not what I want to talk about, but we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to get through it. If you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are on. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And as you may have guessed, today is going to be a Bucks slash former Bucks focused episode. So Gunnar, what do we got coming up?
We'll start it off with probably the biggest news that we got out of all these topics. Of course, we want to talk about Jabari and Jason Kidd, but and another old face too. But Giannis deciding to play in the Olympic qualifying tournament this summer, which is going to start, I think, in a few weeks for him, because that's obviously not the Olympics just quite yet. And then we got some more second apron clarity, which, listening to our last Bucks episode, we were still in question of, are we in the second apron? Are we not in the second apron? And we'll explain all that, where we're standing right now today as it is, and then going into July and thereon after that. Mike Budenholzer got hired with the Phoenix Suns as head coach. Um, Jabari Parker, as I mentioned before, had a viral moment after his overseas season ended. I think in the playoffs or so. He had an emotional post-game interview, so we'll talk about that. And then just our final thoughts on the Mavs Celtics finals matchup that we've got now coming up. So to start out with, probably the biggest topic that we have is Giannis deciding to play in the Olympic qualifying tournament. I know for me, my mind's kind of all over the place on this one, but Spencer, are you surprised? Are you upset? Do you think really that was there ever even a chance that Giannis would not play in this tournament?
Um, it kind of felt like if he was healthy enough to do it, he was going to play. So surprised, no. I thought there was a chance he wouldn't be healthy enough for it. Like that was very much on the table based on what we heard at the end of the season. It seemed like you couldn't rule that out as a possibility that he just would not be ready to participate in this. But we know Giannis pretty well by now, I think, is in terms of how he operates. The only time he's really missed anything like this in terms of any Eurobasket, any of that type of stuff was when he was hurt. So you're not going to get him to miss these types of things, barring injury. And it's a weird spot to be in as a Bucks fan because knowing Giannis, you completely understand that this is something that's extremely important to him. You also understand the amount of backlash he would receive, unfortunately, if he were to opt out of doing it for something other than health, or if he were to opt out without being forced to, basically. It kind of felt like he had that excuse in front of him this time, though, if he wanted to use it, and that he could just say, I'm not ready to go and I'm gonna sit. But he's a competitive dude. He just missed the playoffs, so this is an opportunity in his mind to go out and play in a really competitive type of setting. And it is. I mean, it's an important thing for the people of Greece. They want Greece to make the Olympics as a basketball team. They want them to participate in the Olympics, and this is an important step to being able to do that. So I get it. I do think I understand both sides of this. I get why Bucks fans are upset. I wouldn't say I'm upset. I guess I would say I'm a little bit disappointed, not in him, but just the fact that it's happening. I don't think it's a bad decision or something that's irrational from his point of view. But I do think there's obvious risk involved here for him to potentially worsen whatever he was dealing with the calf, to potentially get hurt in any other way. But it's also something that I think foreign players take this type of stuff a lot more seriously than a lot of American players do. And this means a lot to them. And they also know that this is their opportunity to kind of go out and show that they could beat a team like USA or beat some of these teams that are Spain or Argentina, like the teams that always compete in these big tournaments and do really well. For all these other people, like Luka for Slovenia and all these, like they want that chance to go out and beat those countries and show that, hey, our country can compete with anybody too. And I think it just means more to them. So I get it. Do I love it personally? No. But am I going to be upset with him for choosing to do this? No, I'm not. I get it. I do understand why he would do it. But like I said, I was hoping that maybe he would just be a little bit too far behind on his recovery to be able to participate in this so that he didn't really have a choice and that he didn't have to look like the bad guy to anybody. But Gunnar, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone knows that the last two seasons we've gotten out early because he's had freakish injuries, not to have a little pun intended there, but um technically it's not too soon to return for him. Like we said, I mean the trainers once they clear you, Giannis is gonna have a tough time saying no, but there is obviously that fear of it's doomsday, of course, but oh my God, what if he hurts himself again and now his career might be over, or it's drastically derailed by this injury. For maybe to some people, it might not seem very important. You touched on how the Olympics means to other countries, and it means obviously something amazing to this country as well. But um, I think maybe the fact that it's also not the Olympics completely, maybe is what I could maybe see some people getting some mad at is like, okay, it's you got to really fight to get into just to have a chance to make it even, which is still honorable and everything like that. But yeah, I think that's I guess it's the optimistic from his point of view, but look, we do love him, of course. He can do whatever he wants. I understand that, but I think the obvious question that you got to ask is it fair to maybe Milwaukee and the franchise for him to be doing this? Because like I started out with is we know how important he is to this team. That's anyone can make that statement. He's a top five player at absolute worst, which is crazy to say when you are a Bucks fan and you have that type of player. He is now going to be 30 years old going into next season. And I think some people could maybe view it as maybe a little bit selfish in that aspect. Now he's already got his ring with Milwaukee. I understand that too. But I understand also like going out in the first round the last two seasons, I can see how that sucks. And this optics wise, I can maybe see how people see this as looking bad. I guess for me, I'm somewhere in the middle. Um, I feel like it's maybe not fair to the Bucks and their fans and maybe himself a little bit because like I said, it looks horrible, honestly, on paper. Like, okay. Um, it's all trainers thing too. Like he literally could not play. I understand that in the playoffs. Like, don't even think like, oh, you couldn't have pushed it and you couldn't have made it work for game seven or game six. He literally could not walk. And this was a month ago, which is also scary in that aspect too. So it's not saying like, okay, you should have toughed it out for the playoffs. Why can you play a month later? Definitely not saying that, but it's just somewhere in the uneasiness in the two. I'm somewhere in the middle of just not feeling great about it. But I guess Spencer, from that aspect, from like a Milwaukee franchise team aspect, do you think it's a little? I it's just so hard. Like I don't want to call it disrespectful because it's like you have the right to go play for the Olympics. Like that's it's your own country. That's an awesome thing to do. Anyone would want to play. Like for us, it'd be amazing to play for the United States of America. That'd be awesome. I know everyone talks about having the USA in across their chest. That means so much to people. Um, no matter what level it's at, really. I mean, for baseball, you see it in like high school guys play, and it means something to them. But um, overseas obviously means a lot more. But do you think it's at all maybe again, I can't find the right word for it, but rubbing the wrong way for the Bucks maybe for him making this choice?
No, I don't. I I get what you're saying with the optics. Um, he gives literally everything he has to the Bucks at all times when he's here. I think he should be able to do that for his country, for the people that, I mean, frankly, I wouldn't say the country's always supported him, but they certainly do now. And he clearly cares about it a lot. And he's gone and done it every single opportunity he's had. I will always be scared that Giannis is going to get injured, whether that's in preseason, whether that's in practice, like, no matter what, if he's playing basketball, I'm afraid that he's going to get hurt because it completely flips every season on its head. But that can happen anywhere. Like, we saw, I mean, not to change it to a different player, really, but like Chris Middleton missed an entire season by slipping on the floor in a practice. Like, you can get hurt playing basketball at any time. Yes, there's a little more risk in game for sure because there's more contact, there's less structure to what's happening, but I think it's fair. I think it's fine. Again, personally, I don't love it, but it's not because I don't like that he's doing it. It's that I do have concerns over just more and more playing, potentially leading to injury, but I think it's his prerogative to be able to do that. So I've got no problem with it. At least in terms of how it works and how it looks for the Bucks franchise. I don't think it's a problem. I would imagine the Bucks don't love it themselves, but again, I don't think it's because they think it's selfish or anything like that. I think it's because they're in the same spot where they would feel uncomfortable with him doing anything that's not within their
Mhm.
own structure and their own practice structure, their own, full court runs that they do in the summer. Like that type of stuff is more controlled, but nothing is going to be safe really when you're going as hard as Giannis goes in every setting that he plays in. So, I that's where I would leave it, I guess. I don't love it personally, but it's fine. I don't think it's a knock or unfair to the Bucks or anything like that either. Do you have anything else on that?
No, I don't think so. I was trying to think. I thought I had maybe one more point, but I don't. I think that's just a good point to leave it off on is he has the right to do what he did. Um, he already got us his championship. It's just you got to really remove the fact that the recent bias in this fact is we're out in the first round. He's been hurt the last two playoffs. Just relax, take a deep breath. I think the summer point's a good point too because what do you think guys are doing in the summer? Like once it hits July, he's going to be ramping up. Like that was probably the timeline anyways. It's just now he actually gets a little bit more of a competitive jump into it, which yeah, it's scary, but that was more my point too with freakish injuries, which my bad pun, of course, but um, that's probably more of the scary part of it is because one happened with him just walking up the court, which he could do that at the grocery store if he was walking up the court. I know it sounds stupid, but that's literally what could have happened. And then the one before that, he just fell in midair, and we saw what happened with that. So um, I just think it's optics wise, I get it, but it's Giannis. Take a breath. We love him. Just let him enjoy himself. He's going to do anything. He's going to have practices, hard practices, regardless in July. So, if anything, and maybe it gets him a little bit more ready for next season and puts us in a better spot. And, like we talked about last episode too, he's the fact that maybe he's ramping up and more of an optimistic look at it is we get to see how he looks this soon. And if he looks really good in early July already, that gives more of a window for him to work with Dame this offseason and Chris this offseason. It's just more time for everybody to gel together this year. So I think it's look at it in that way. I guess it's a really good positive. So I guess next we can slide into I guess another big topic really, but one that we hope we understand. Um, we pretty sure we understand. I know we've talked about it a lot to where we don't even know where we stood at the point, but now I think we get it because of our tweets that we got from Van Fayez. Is that fair to say is his name? Frank Madden reposted this, so shout out to him. But he had this whole Twitter thread. We can go through it, but basically breaking down where the Bucks stand right now, as is we are before the NBA draft, which happens in a few weeks, and then once free agency starts on July 1st. So he was crunching the numbers with Bobby Marks. He's the classic crunch the numbers guy. Bobby Marks also made the worst trade in NBA history the last decade. I want to make sure that never gets forgotten with the Brooklyn Nets. So he said his first tweet started out with, if the Bucks guarantee Andre Jackson Jr. and AJ Green, which they obviously should, and sign their two draft picks. That's the first round pick and the second round pick. They would have to add two more vet minimums to make the roster 14, which you have to have 14 guys in the roster. You don't have a choice. The only way they can aggregate salaries in a trade this offseason is if they cut $3.8 million in salaries. So that's going into July 1st. So no matter what, basically, and you can cut me off anytime, Spencer, because it's going to get very confusing maybe if I break this down. But no matter what, we are going to be a second apron team going into July 1st. So I know there's an old Frank Madden tweet, which you'll talk about later in this text or Twitter thread, where he talked about maybe the Bucks might have slid under this second apron sneakily because Chris wouldn't hit his unlikely bonuses. But the problem with that is because this is still last year technically considered. The new season doesn't start until July 1st. So then no matter what, he didn't hit them, but that's what kind of makes us turn it over into July 1st and gives us new opportunity to do that. So yeah, so basically going on with this Twitter thread is the Bucks are a second apron team for now and through the June 30th, like I said. So a trade with salaries aggregated like Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton, our old reliable, as we called it earlier at the trade deadline, could only happen after July 1st. But um, basically, as me and Spencer also understand this, is once you go into July 1st, yes, you can do that, but you also have to cut salaries to make that happen. So you can't just walk into July 1st and say, hey, this is our roster. Now we get to aggregate salaries. It's not actually how that works. So basically, even in that scenario, you'd have to cut, I believe, where is it? I think it was around $9 million you had to cut even in that scenario.
No, it's that 3.8. They got to get like 4 million off the
Oh yeah,
books.
it was the nine to get down to the taxpayer mid level, which I'll talk
Yeah.
about that later with my trade maybe. But yeah, I guess I'll cut it off there because that was already a lot in those the first three tweets. But I guess do you have any thoughts in those overall? Is it a little more clarity for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing people need to keep in mind is that this probably means that the Brewers, I've got Brewers on the brain too much right now. The Bucks need to trade somebody in a 1-for-1 where they clear probably pretty close to 4 million, um, which is tough because most of the contracts that are even above 4 million are the ones you are hoping to aggregate when you have the chance to do it. So that makes it difficult. I think when you look at a guy like Pat, that might be the easiest one to swing a 1-for-1 for. Um, I could see that more than Bobby in my head, just because I feel
People
like
who
Bobby's
want
going to.
not to cut you out, but people who want to trade Pat for just picks, that's probably not going to happen. Or Pat and a pick to move up in the draft, that's not going to happen. It's probably going to be Pat for a worse or lesser contract.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah, that would be most likely. I mean, you never know. There are some teams who could pretty much absorb
I'd
Pat's
love it.
contract,
Yeah.
but it would have to be, I mean, you'd be getting like a protected second round pick or something. This would not be
Hmm.
anything super exciting in that trade, but it would be a way to clear space. So maybe something like that happens. But either way, that's where they need to get. And then on July 1st, they would be able to perhaps combine Bobby, maybe the lesser player that they got that saved them some money, maybe Brooke, maybe guys like that. All of those, then you'd be able to combine in a trade. But it's it's going to be a tightrope to walk for Horse this year, and it has been for a while. Because even and he laid this out a little bit further down, but if they were to make a 2-for-1 deal at this time, they would be hard capped at the second apron, which means they can't go over that at all, no matter what. So then you're trying to fill that roster spot that they talked about already. You know, the extra roster spots you're going to need. You're losing
Hmm.
guys like Malik Beasley. And you would almost not have enough to even do that. You probably wouldn't have enough to even do that, depending on what the trade looks like. And you really would have no more room to maneuver as the season goes on. So they really can't. There's a lot to work around here. They have to be on top of this stuff. They cannot make a mistake by thinking one thing and having another happen when they make a trade. Like it's going to have to be very, very cleanly put together this whole offseason. And yeah, it's the Middleton thing is important because, like Gunnar said, those don't come off the books as unlikely bonuses until the new year, which again, start of July. Um, so yeah, and the other thing you have to keep in mind is they can't take more money back than what they send out in any trade.
Hmm.
So even if they were to, which would defeat the purpose of what we just talked about, but in case somebody came with like a Bobby Portis 1-for-1 for somebody who costs $100,000 more than Bobby, they can't do that. Like even under most of the salary cap rules, you could, but because they're a second apron team, they cannot take back any more than what they send out. So, like I said, it's just going to be a tightrope walk for Horst. He's going to have to figure it out. I will say, for the most part, he's been able to do that over the course of time. We haven't agreed with every move. Not all of them have worked out. But when he puts himself in a corner or finds himself in a corner, he does tend to do a pretty good job of getting out of it. So it's just going to be super interesting to see which way they take it. But I do think this kind of clarified some of the stuff that we were wondering, that thread specifically. Gunnar, I don't know if you had more to add or if there was something that stood out to you from what we just went through.
Yeah, that was the biggest one too, is you literally cannot go any higher than the top dollar that you have. So I know the famous trade, which we talked about on one of the podcasts, was Bobby for Grant Williams. I think Grant makes point 0.2 more than Bobby Portis, but now you can't make that trade. Assuming we do nothing else. Obviously, there's ways to get under it now, but at least on like draft night or something, I can't. You know what to expect, I guess, going in, which at least we got a little bit of clarity. But before, we might have been hoping for a certain trade or maybe something happening because that's usually when stuff spice up. But I think the weird thing about this too is um, you see a lot of teams. I wonder if there's even like one other team even close to our scenario because you see a lot of teams either blow past the second apron or because we knew about it for a year. Most teams don't even want to hover on the line. You're either for sure not going to be a second apron team or you are just going to pay out the wazoo to keep your team together. I think the Phoenix Suns are obviously a team like that, I think for sure. So, yeah, I think we put ourselves in a little bit of a weird scenario, but I like that maybe we're not totally out of it. I know he laid out in one of his tweets, and maybe you did too, but probably the easiest and the most unfortunate way is getting rid of guys like Marjan or Chris Livingston for picks. That seems the most realistic to me. I know we don't care much for Marjan or Livingston, but those are guys that maybe you could have used to spice up a deal to aggregate salaries with, which again, that's hypothetical. We were hoping that would spice up a deal. Maybe that doesn't even spice up a deal at all. Yeah, on paper, it definitely probably shouldn't, but you never know. So yeah, I think those are the biggest things for me. And then I don't know if there was really a better way to navigate this, thinking about it more too. And another point I wanted to say, I guess, along the lines of navigating this is I don't think Chris's salary last offseason was a coincidence. I think he got market value too, but it was pretty weird how we were able to stay along the line of second apron, but also not blow past it like I was talking about, and even Brook Lopez's deal. Because we had those guys bird rights. We could have gave them a lot more than what they got. Brook, again, market value, yes. The Rockets gave him, I think, more. It was reported that they would have gave him more. So, and then Chris got around $30 million coming off of injuries, but playing well, blah, blah, blah. But I just don't think those were maybe like again, not a coincidence. It's not rocket science that we're just along the lines, but I know we joked about maybe it seemed like if we didn't sign Gallo, we might have been under the second apron. I wonder if that was still true. Because again, this is considering last season, it probably still would have been very close, and I'm sure John Horst went over that. And then your flexibility, it kills us for 1 week, and I'm sure John has a plan now, and we know that John's going to be our GM, I guess now officially too. So, I'm sure he's thinking about, okay, I can just dump off Marjan and Livingston and get those picks back. But I guess, do you have any, now that you know what we're dealing with here, do you have a best way to maybe navigate it going forward? Whether that is, do you think a deal gets done on draft night? How are you going to navigate those picks? Are you going to sign all those picks? Do you want to draft both of them now? Or would you rather go the vet minimum route? Or maybe we'll start with that because that's already a lot to unpack with on draft night before we get to July 1st. How are you going to handle draft night now?
I think you got to make those picks. Those are cheaper players than vet minimums. The first
Hmm.
rounder might not be. The second rounder will be. The first rounder will be very close to a vet minimum, though. So I think you take both those picks. Granted, you don't know. I don't want to speak in absolutes because if you do get a trade that comes around that makes a ton of sense involving the picks, then you still make that trade. But barring that happen, I think you do go out and make those two picks and add two more young players who are controlled to the roster. And along the lines of like the Marjan and Livingston stuff, Marjan, I think, does make sense to do that because I don't know what his salary's gotten up to now. I'm going to look it up as I talk here, but it's definitely a first round pick who's escalating, whereas
Hmm.
Livingston's a pretty locked in last pick of the draft. There shouldn't be too much going up, and that makes him really cheap in terms of like he's cheaper than a vet minimum. So trading him to you wouldn't really clear any space. You'd actually probably end up adding more to it by replacing him with somebody off the streets. So I do think Marjan is going to be getting he's 2,733,000 next year. Um, and the last year option is for 4 million. So or 4,700,000. So it's I think he's the one to me that stands out the most because he does combine a little bit of the higher salary compared to the other guys. And he might have some actual somebody might still be interested in him value wise. Somebody who he got from he was a first round pick a couple of years ago. I don't believe in him. but there's always a chance that a team who liked him in the draft process does still like him now, and maybe they'll take a chance on him. Maybe they'll give you a second round pick, which means you could turn that money into a little bit cheaper, um, a cheaper salary slot. He could. There's just more to work with for Marjan. So for Livingston, I would say hold Livingston, and I would move Marjan if I have to choose between the two. But I do think you take the picks to answer the original question, which I now rambled beyond for much longer. But I do think you make both those picks unless there's a clear cut trade that makes sense. Because yeah, I'm almost certain the vet minimum will be higher for sure than the second, and I think it'd be pretty close to the first. So yeah, what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, I guess talking about spicing up deals too, I could actually see Marjan in our second round pick and try to jump up a few slots too. That seems realistic, or even Livingston. Obviously can't combine those guys together, but um, for people, like I said earlier, if you want to combine Pat with the pick, that's not probably going to happen, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's probably the best way to navigate it too, just on money purposes. And I guess good luck for us as we need the young guys anyways. So you might as well just draft the two guys that you want. And then it goes back to that first tweet really too. I mean, signing Andre Jackson Jr., AJ Green, and then your two picks and then two vet minimums. That's kind of how we navigate what would have navigated anyways. And now you just have to wait until July 1st to make those trades, or not even necessarily that, but then to cut the salary. So um, I guess now fast forwarding either through that time period or to July 1st, how would we navigate it? And just maybe overall, how would we navigate this? I wanted to bring a fake trade to you, Spencer, today and get the ball rolling a little bit. And I thought it was a little clever because I know that we're in the second apron now. I wanted to get a little bit weird. And it's not super weird, I guess. I'm really hyping it up now. It's not going to be that fantastic at all, but I think it gives us a lot of options as far as their team goes. But I did mention Brook Lopez and the Rockets earlier. They did pick up Steven Adams at the trade deadline, coming off of a knee surgery. So you're like, man, I don't know if I really want him, but that's $12 million. They've got a ton of young guys. They cannot play 10 young players and have a rotation where everyone's happy. There's no way. There's some guys in that team that I don't absolutely love. There's some guys I do love, but they won't trade. So I also don't watch the Rockets totally, but I think one guy that makes a little bit of sense based upon their minutes, um, the salary that he is, and I think this trade will give us a way to shed salary, but I'm thinking we take back Steven Adams and maybe Cam Whitmore for Brook Lopez. They get their center. We get a center, a veteran center that I don't love again. Um, but we also get a nice young player. I think they'd be willing to trade him out of all the young guys. Again, take your pick. I don't really care which one it is because there's something to like about each and every one of those guys. But like I said, they got to get rid of them at one point. So I think he's maybe the one that I like the most realistic. And then that's in that way it frees us up the salary. Then we can aggregate salaries after that. We don't have to worry about getting rid of Marjan or Chris Livingston. Now we can combine. We have free will to combine anybody after that because that would for sure clear the 3.8 at that point. Um, and then you get our big guy back. Hopefully, Steven Adams is decent on defense. I know he was at one point. He doesn't shoot like Brook Lopez. So then you would probably definitely need to get a guy who can shoot at the big man position. Um, I'm considering again, anytime I offer trading Brook Lopez, it's not because I want to keep Bobby Portis, it's because I'm also trying to get rid of Bobby Portis too. So it's not because I'm picking him or over him. This allows me to trade Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton and get whoever you want at that point. So, Spencer, you're not going to love the trade. I understand that, but do you at least like the thought process behind it? Um, and do you maybe have your own second apron trade, a one for one that sheds some salary? Do you got anything for us today?
All right, well, we'll talk about yours first. So, um, I would be shocked if they wanted to move Whitmore out of their group. I would love Whitmore on the Bucks. He is, I'm not even, he might be my favorite of the young guys outside of Jabari Smith. I do not like Jalen Green. Please do not give me Jalen Green on the
They would
Bucks
trade
ever.
him. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, I do not want Jalen Green whatsoever. I like I like Whitmore a lot. If you really wanted to sell me on a trade, you should have put Jock Landale in there, but it's fine. I'll get past it. Bucks Summer League legend. No, I don't want Jock Landale. I'm joking. I would take him for like a vet minimum, but he's getting $8 million the next couple of years, so no, thank you. Um, I've always liked Steven Adams a lot. I do think, well, I don't believe you need someone who can shoot with Giannis at the five, especially because of Dame's gravity and all the gravity they can create in other ways. I would prefer the center to be more athletic than what Adams is, and especially coming off of a knee thing, it's hard to say what you're going to get from him. But in terms of like what you said, in terms of the thought process, I do think that's the kind of thing they should look into if they're going to move Brook. I would just hope it would be maybe a little bit of a different package. But I do think you would probably want to get a center back in that trade, or you would have to have something lined up um, with Bobby and Pat or whatever after you get below the apron by making this Brook trade. But I do think that's a pretty good idea. In terms of actual trades that I came up with, I don't have one right now. I wasn't prepared for that. But I do think just generally I would look into I know that we've spent a lot of time trying to combine Pat and Bobby together. I would probably lean more towards trying to trade one of them in a one for one that gets you under that apron and just gives you the ability to move other people around. Like you said with Marjan, that could be Marjan and Bobby gets you to like 15 million almost. That's the type of guy that you could get a decent player in that type of move. Then maybe you do. I do think people should keep in mind the draft day trades don't necessarily have to go through. Like you can draft somebody with the plan to create or to push the trade through on July 1st when they do after they make another move or whatever. Like if you think back to the Drew Holiday trade, the original one when we got Drew Holiday, we drafted what's his name? Played for the Magic afterwards. RJ Hampton. We drafted
Yes.
him even though that trade had been public for a week. We drafted Hampton because technically we couldn't trade that pick at the time, but we could trade him once, or we could trade it once everything went through and once we had maneuvered some stuff. So I think there could be a trade on draft day that involves one of the picks, but doesn't necessarily go through for a few more days. And that way you could combine the player that got drafted and the the combined salaries if you're able to make a separate move. So there's a lot of stuff they could do. I don't have a specific one, but I do like the idea of what you're coming up with there. So with that, I think we could move on to a former Bucks coach who is just starting a new job. So this will be part one of two parts of talking about former Bucks coaches. This one will make me happier. I can talk about Bud and have no issue talking about Bud. Um, like I mentioned, he was announced as the Suns' new head coach. He his opening, especially, he was pretty emotional. First of all, he looks really good. Like lost a ton of weight, looks to have cleaned up a little bit. Like he was going through obviously a lot at the end of his Bucks tenure, especially in that last playoff series with his brother passing and everything else that happened. Um, so it was really good to just see him looking like healthy and happy. And he mentioned in his comments that it was kind of something that he felt in the end was good for him that he needed. He needed that time away to be with family, to be able to spend some time on himself. And he shouted out Milwaukee and more specifically like the front office and management in Milwaukee for everything that they did for him. But yeah, Gunnar, I know there were some rumors about potential Darvin Ham joining him, as he obviously did in Milwaukee. Sounds like that's not going to happen. But did you have any final thoughts on the press conference, on him getting the job? Any any memories you like from the Bud tenure specifically?
Memories wise, outside of the championship, I love the tweet thread of his all of his faces that he made in the sidelines. Um, it means nothing to be over animated as a coach, but we always appreciate it nonetheless for the meme, and it just shows us that you care, I guess, a little bit. We've had coaches who, a recent one actually, who just decided to look like just paralyzed on the sidelines.
You are.
But it was awesome. It was awesome to see that. And then of course he was honestly a pretty great coach. Great culture builder. Floor setter for sure is probably the best and the safest way to put it, where if you want to get your team to a certain point and always competing and always in the mix and you got talent, he's probably going to get you there pretty easily. He's proven that a couple stops now. And then going into a team like the Suns, he's already got stars in place who have been there before. Obviously, we played against them in the finals, which does sting a little bit there that he did choose the Suns, but obviously it makes complete sense for him. And happy to see him happy, which I think we tweeted that too off the account, which it was very obvious that it lined up sort of unfortunately perfectly to where the Bucks had to move on after a disappointing run that season with a lot of high expectations, even the season before. With the injuries and all that, we know this all the stories. I'm gonna get caught up in talking about it again, but um, it made sense from the Bucks aspect. Then we don't have to get into what Mike Budenholzer was going through, but I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So just horrible to be going through that at that time. And then you could just tell, and any human being could relate to that, is just he probably just needed time to himself, and that's what he expressed in that uh, interview when he got hired is I really just need to take a step back and be with my family and enjoy the simple things in life. But he also mentioned how much coaching means to him. So I'm glad that he was able to get back up on the stand and actually want to be a coach again. And he deserves success, honestly. Unless we're playing against him, I hope that he loses and loses horribly. But besides that, I'll always root for him. He's a great guy. Anyone who treats Milwaukee the way that he treated us and Giannis the way that he treated him, Chris, all the guys, he made the culture of Milwaukee, people wanting to come here, like a thing again. It's one thing to have a star, but to actually want people to come here, we know, look around the league for the last decade, it's not that easy to get stars to go. LeBron couldn't get stars to go to Cleveland sometimes. Like it was not that easy at all. But the way that Bud actually coached this team and had the environment that he did, it made it super easy for people to want to come here. I wish he was, I'm gonna get caught up again, but I do wish maybe he was coaching right now with Dame in this roster with the regime that we have now. I think it could still work. We talked about that, but I think Bud would have worked pretty well with this group. But besides that, I'm gonna get off point again. But yeah, I love Bud. If you heard me talk about him at the last time he was coaching the Bucks, you would be like, "Wow, where did this come from?" I would never expect you to say this, but looking back and having a year off to take, to breathe a little bit, I can appreciate what he did for us in the city and the franchise. And yeah, I mean, the guy we'll talk about later is maybe why I'm so thankful to have a guy like him. Um, because of, like I said, the culture period is what it was just awesome to be a part of and watch because um we grew up obviously as Bucks fans and we know what that culture was like and we were laughed at for liking the Bucks and I think he's honestly a big part of what made the Bucks cool again, which is pretty cool to see. But do you got any memories from the Mike Budenholzer era or him specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on a lot of the stuff I wanted to point out, which is definitely a floor raiser. He brings you to a point where it's pretty unlikely that you're going to have a bad season. Obviously, you need some talent and something around him because those Hawks teams at the end of his Hawks tenure showed you can't just do it with Dennis Schroeder and nobody else around him. But it is when he has the talent or in place, like he can make your team competitive every single year, like you said. Um, I guess sleeper favorite memory for him, short of the finals, was Giannis receiving MVP and just seeing how happy and like proud
Hmm.
he looked in that moment.
That's
Like
a
he
good
was
one.
crying. Um, and then the same thing when they won the finals, you could just see like as much as we didn't love some of what Bud did with the adjustments and lack thereof of adjustments and stuff, you can tell the players loved him. Like they wanted to play for him. He had created this culture, like you said, where people didn't want to, not only did people want to come, but they didn't want to leave. People have taken pay cuts to stay with the Bucks during the Bud tenure a decent amount of times. They took pay cuts to come to the Bucks a decent amount of times. That's not just Giannis. That's not just the guys in place and Chris, because that wasn't happening until Bud got here. That wasn't happening under the previous coach that we will again be discussing soon. Um, and it wasn't, well, frankly, it's the next two people we're going to be talking about that I think you could make an argument were part of the issue with the culture. But um, it's, I'm in the same boat. I'm going to be rooting for him. I appreciate everything he did here. I won't ever feel that bad about doing what the Bucks did. I think it was the follow-up moves to firing Bud that cost them a lot more than the actual move of firing Bud in terms of who they hired. But I do 100% agree that if they knew they were going to get Dame, I think there's a pretty good chance Bud would have got another year to work through whatever he was working through. But like I mentioned early on, it seems like Bud kind of thinks it was the right timing for him too. And genuinely, if you haven't seen any of the press conference, just even a picture, like you won't believe it looks a lot like the guy we hired and not like the guy that was at the end of his tenure with the Bucks. I mean, he looks just to be in much, much better shape and much just like physically and mentally, you can tell he's in a better place. So that was good to see for sure. I guess on that note, somebody who maybe isn't in as great a spot mentally at the moment, Jabari Parker. Obviously, everyone who's listening to this knows the Jabari Parker story in terms of his Bucks career. Second overall pick, multiple torn ACLs, um, ended up not even getting an offer in restricted free agency from the Bucks. They did not match the Bulls offer. They did not create a sign and trade. They let Jabari Parker, who was supposed to be one of their main pieces in this big rebuild that had started with the Giannis pick and then carried over into that next season with the Jabari pick. They let him walk for nothing his first chance that he had to the Bulls. And if people recall, his one of his first quotes was, "They don't pay you to play defense in the NBA." I will admit, and I won't even admit, I don't know why I'm admitting anything here. I will state I did not like Jabari Parker as a Buck. He was fun. He made fun plays. He pissed me off a lot. I didn't think his his quote about not playing defense was very obvious when you watched games that he believed that to his core at that time. What I will say is that I think as he got older, he did learn the importance of some of these things. Unfortunately, then his body had kind of passed him by and he had these torn ACLs. He'd had quite a few injuries. And for that, I certainly feel bad for him. Anyway, that leads into he's playing overseas now. He's playing for, I believe, Barcelona, their basketball team. And like Gunnar said earlier, I'm not sure if it was the end. I'm assuming it was after a playoff loss or something, but it was just a one-on-one, basically, reporter asking him a question. He asked him, it's your first year away from America. It's your first year playing overseas, first season here. He was just trying to get like, how was it? How did you like your first season? And Jabari genuinely could not get a word out. He just started tearing up and like, I don't think we'll ever know exactly what caused that. I mean, you can speculate what it was. You have to imagine a lot of that was kind of a flashback on his career and like, how did I get here? And how am I answering this question right now instead of, playing in the NBA, playing for championships, playing on a good Bucks team where he could have ended up being, like I'm sure a lot of that went through his head. You never know, missing family. You're away from family when you're playing overseas, or people had to turn their lives upside down to go with you overseas. So there's a lot of stuff that could have been going through his head, but I will say that was the first time since he left that I like genuinely felt really bad for him watching that. You could just tell everything kind of hit him. And the reporter, I don't think fully grasped what was going on. So he didn't seem to be helping at first. And then he started to understand that maybe I need to just stop talking and let him have his space. So luckily that ended up happening, but it was like a minute of him just sitting there, like trying. You could tell he was trying to give the guy an answer and he just could not say anything. And it was really hard to see. So that's my thoughts on it. I mean, like I said, I'm not going to feel terrible for the guy. He made $2 million this year over there, and money's not everything, but he's made upwards of $50 million playing basketball in his career. Like he's doing fine financially, but there is a lot of stuff that goes on, and money does not solve all your problems. So seeing him in that place mentally was hard to see because at one point that was the dream. Like you were seeing Giannis and Jabari, and I've been a Chris guy since day one, but it was supposed to be Giannis and Jabari with Chris as the third wheel, not Giannis and Chris as the top two. So, yeah, Gunnar, what were your thoughts on that? And what did you don't need to, if you have anything else that you think might have caused this, you can go on, but I think I probably did enough speculation for everybody.
Yeah, I think, well, the first clip that we saw was just him crying on that question before you saw the full interview. And that, like you said, broke my heart. It's all, no matter who it is, I don't want to see that happen to them. especially a guy that played for the Bucks and seemed like a nice guy on the surface. We'll never know behind the scenes or whatever, but Giannis loved him. It seemed like players still loved him. But then you look at it was like a 2, 3 minute clip, and the reporter, yeah, I don't think there was a language barrier there clearly. And
Oh
he
yeah.
could
One
not
of those
read.
lines, one of the questions was that would not have flown here. You don't
No.
mean anything by it, but holy smokes, that sounded bad. Like in our context of America, like, oh,
Yeah, a couple of those lines, like he could not read Jabari Parker at all or anything of the situation. So I don't want to make fun of him too much. It's probably very hard to do that. I couldn't imagine doing it the other way around and trying to communicate with somebody. So it's super difficult. But I did chuckle at that a little bit. But to be serious again, I did like the Jabari pick in 2014. We're going back, not love Jabari, but I wanted Andrew Wiggins. That's documented in a tweet. So if anyone wants to fact check me, I think I wanted Wiggins so bad that I said I would stop being a Bucks fan, which is not even close to being true, but that's how bad I wanted Wiggins. Um, and everyone knows Andrew Wiggins, obviously. He was supposed to be the next LeBron and all the hoop mixtapes. And I was like, this is a guy who's going to change our franchise. No one's going to laugh at us again if we get Andrew Wiggins. And then we got the second pick, and I knew that was going to be possible. And then I did not want if I'm being honest, I didn't want Joel Embiid. Um, I like the talent, but the injuries, I'm like, that's prototypical Bucks pick right there. If we get the guy with the talent, the injuries, and then it ends up going that way. Woody gets injured, and then it's just a bust. But what did we end up with? A guy who got injured and potentially was a bust. So jokes on us. But um, we all know what he brought defensively. Um, the core part of what you were talking about with it was supposed to be this vision of Giannis and Jabari and um the other point I was going to make and you stole it, which is good with the Chris. I know you probably would was um you always see the clips of like Giannis and Jabari like this was supposed to run the league. Giannis and Chris did that. Like they're doing Chris did exactly what you'd want Jabari to do. A guy next to Giannis and playing like that, it was the perfect guy to have. But that makes it, I guess, a little bit more sad because you could have had three guys who are really good. Um, but yeah, I think it's tough because if you also put yourself in that mindset back then, I wonder if the hope of Jabari maybe even led into a little bit of this. It was pre-Bucks era, it was or Bud era, it was Kid era, but that's when the hype started to build back up, and I think Jabari got that ball rolling first in a way. That's coming off a 15 win season. There was some hope that we're going to get the star and he was going to change the Bucks. While there was probably, and we can read into Jabari a little bit, but there's probably a little bit of jealousy. Unfortunately, I have to use that word, but you're the highly touted guy, the second pick, supposed to be the savior of this broken franchise, this laughing stock of a franchise that everyone just jokes about. And you're going to save it. Like you're the guy. And then you see this other guy, skinny kid, who just works his ass off all the time. Um, Come and take your throne, and then while you get injured, and he's just soaring at a astronomical rate, and he's blowing by. He's doing everything that you wanted to do and accomplish here. And then you get injured again, and then you play the way you do, and then your career goes the way that it goes. So, um, I think at the very least, I think that's the most positive thing is he got the ball rolling first. It felt like, but um, there is probably a little bit of a sad story there personally of Jabari. It's like you had to watch this guy live your dream.
yeah,
Um, and that's a little bit of you should be happy, but let's be honest, we're all human beings. That would suck to watch if you thought that was supposed to be you, and you probably did. I mean, highly touted high school guy too. Wasn't he like the #1 high school player or
yeah.
whatever in the
Oh
like
yeah.
country? So, literally got to watch a guy live his dream. So, um, yeah, I think the ending too was that's a whole other discussion too, how it ended, but it was just a gross season, how that all transpired. And I saw another tweet, I don't know if you saw it, but somebody said that um he like joked about like his rehab or something, or like he wasn't taking it seriously. And
Yeah.
that was the vibe, and who knows if that's true or not, but that was the vibe I almost got too, is not necessarily that, but with the defense comments and now seeing that tweet, and who knows if that's true, but we'll throw that in there just because we're podcasting. But um yeah, I don't think it clicked for him fully ever. And it's hard to click when you have so many things thrown at you at a young age, and you're watching, like I said, Giannis, and you get hurt, and you're not playing the way you want to play, and um, just everything at once. It just never got to fully form. But I will leave it off on the fact that if you guys remember last offseason, he was supposed to be in the summer league team, and I would love to see him on the summer league team this offseason. That would be no harm, no foul. He gets to be back with the Bucks organization. Um, we got to fill a minimum spot. If he somehow is incredible, toss it to him. And if
Yeah.
he's bad, cut him. I don't know. But worst case scenario, he just brings you guys some tickets for the summer league, and we get to see a photo with Giannis and Chris or something, and all of them. Well, I guess Giannis is overseas now, but yeah. I guess, did you have any other thoughts on Jabari? I know this is painful for you to talk about, but
Nah, I mean, I liked it. I like talking about him in this vein more than the people who lie and say that he was
yeah,
supposed to be or that he was going to be great. Like he wasn't going to be. He was going to me what you were looking at was like a Jordan Clarkson type guy, but he was 6'9", which could be a better player than Jordan Clarkson. Like a guy who goes and he can really score at the hoop. He was shooting pretty well from three, but you unless he had suddenly completely reinvented himself on defense and bought in, I don't see how it was going to work out. The thing is, exactly what you're talking about. I did see that tweet about, and I remember hearing some of this at the time too. So I think there's at least something to it that he didn't really attack his rehab very hard because I think he just kind of felt invincible when he got to the league. Like you talked about, this is a guy who was on Slam magazine covers as a high schooler, a guy who was a number one recruit in the country, the guy who went to Duke and dominated and was an easy top three pick. Like there was no debate. He was going in the top three. It was going to be Wiggins, Jabari, and Embiid in some order. Nobody really fully knew until it happened, but he was going to be a top three pick. He came in, like you said, as the face of the Bucks. He was the face of the Bucks. Giannis had a fun rookie year, but that was not the face. They were trying to make them both like big parts of, build the future or own the future, I should say. But Jabari was the guy. That was the one that was supposed to be. And I think what you talked about is that he probably had a hint of jealousy. And I think what he probably has learned over the years is that the way they attack things is why they both ended up where they did. I think you had Giannis, who was coming from nothing, who didn't have any of that glamour coming through the ranks. Like people didn't even know who he was when his name got called on draft day. Um, I had heard his name like two times before that draft pick the entire time. Like I didn't even hardly know who he was when they took him. But Jabari Parker, when he got picked, it was we're gonna have a parade. Like we're gonna have he's coming in. We're gonna do this huge thing for him. It's all gonna be like we're gonna get an arena because of this guy. Like, and I will say, I don't think that's wrong. I do think Jabari actually played a role in the Bucks getting a new arena and the Bucks staying in Milwaukee. So for that, you have to give him. I don't know if he gets credit for that, but you have to at least give him some sort of acknowledgement for that. Um, but yeah, I don't know if he necessarily deserved better in the NBA. Um, but it would have been nice if he did. You could have a Malik Beasley type of, or not Malik, Michael Beasley type of reinvigoration I could see because Michael Beasley went overseas for a few years before he came back to the NBA, didn't he? Um,
yeah,
but we are also talking about what is he, 29 right now, Jabari? I mean, he was
yeah. He's not
drafted
even
in
30, I don't
14.
think. Yeah,
Yeah, so I guess you could say like there's been plenty of people who did that. So maybe he's had an awakening and like Gunnar said, I wouldn't hate him being on the summer league team and see what happens. Maybe a different mindset could do him well in the NBA, but yeah, it was a really sad interview. I feel bad for him in a lot of ways, but I do think in a lot of ways he also did contribute quite a bit to his undoing in the NBA. So in that way it was somewhat on him, but plenty of tough breaks along the way as well. So anything else on that before we jump into my actual least favorite topic on this one?
yeah. I'll give you a little more time to think about that one, but yeah. I think the topic of like deserved to me, it's more like earned, and he didn't earn it necessarily, and
Yes.
it sucks. He got dealt a bad hand, but we've seen. And even I was a guy, you hated Jabari a lot more than I did. I didn't like him at the end, but like I saw some talent there still. Like maybe we can make something work. But um, he just didn't earn it. And like the perfect guy to compare it to is Giannis, and what I just did and you just did. But like that guy earned it, and he didn't earn it. He was just dealt a bad hand. But I think I've just been so sick of seeing like the tweets literally for probably over half a decade now of like these two were supposed to run the league, and we did just watch Jabari play, and he played no defense when he did play, and bragged about not playing like all those things can still be real. It's not like this super sad story of whatever. I mean, Derrick Rose, I guess, is the most comparable guy, an MVP, then turns into what he turned into, a good player, I guess, too. That could be a nice story for him. But yeah, he just didn't earn it to me is maybe the best way to put it. Because I don't think anything's really deserved. You have to earn it. Even Giannis would probably say that he doesn't deserve to be really is technically, but he earned it because he put the work in. So
Yep.
yeah, that's probably a good way to end it.
Yeah. All right. Well, now we got to talk about the one that I really don't want to talk about. Really, I don't want to talk about either team. We'll touch on these finals though quick because it will probably be a pretty entertaining series. If it was not
Hmm.
these two teams specifically, I'd be enjoying it more. But obviously, it's the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. Let's start it off easy. Easy talk here, Gunnar. Who you got in this one? Who you taking to win the finals?
If I honestly don't know how to put it into words for people how horrible this is for us, I had to pick Jason Kidd or I had to pick the Celtics. That's just the biggest nightmare possible. I think I've been able to sleep at night thinking the most about a scenario where the Mavericks win the championship, and I'm able to put Jason Kidd. He's always going to be there, his bald head in the back of my mind when I think about the
Yep.
Mavericks, but I can push that to the side a little bit more. I can think about Luka getting his first one. He's had an awesome run. I know you hate Kyrie too, so that's probably another stinger for you. But I've liked Kyrie. I like how he plays. That's been my guilty pleasure over the last decade or so, as I'm a big Kyrie fan. So I know that hurts you, but um, yeah, I think it's just the Mavericks. I also like their team a little bit better than the Celtics, and that sounds like I'm hating on the Celtics. I'm not, but they might not have Porzingis too. But I think the Mavericks have built a super, super good roster around Luka, and Kyrie now is um almost an asset to Luca. So it's not even like they built around those two guys. He just built around Luca perfectly. But um, guys that we could have picked up and we could have picked up Daniel Gafford. I think that one was realistic. But PJ Washington is a guy that I know we both have wanted for years. Um, Not a star in any right, but that's a perfect role player to have on any
Mhm.
single team. Literally any plug and play in any team in the league in the playoffs. He would have played in the rotation. This is an awesome guy. So they just did a really good job of building around him. And the Celtics, we all know they got heavy hitters as the top four guys, five even if Porzingis is healthy. Al Horford is horrible to watch, but he's really, really good, and I'm just waiting for him to retire because I can't take it anymore. Um, I just it comes down to that I just can't watch the Celtics win a championship. I will be a hater in that sense, but yeah, I guess we'll start with just like the question you asked me. Who do you have between these two teams?
I'm hoping an asteroid hits and we don't have to worry about it. But if I have to pick, God, I here's the thing. Out of all of them, my favorite player on the two teams is Drew Holiday. Um, I also, despite his absolute dismantling of the Bucks over the years, I have always been a very big Al Horford guy. As you know, I wanted us to sign him at one point. Um, I enjoy Luca quite a bit, and I will say I enjoy watching Kyrie more on this Mavs team than I have since any team or any role he's been in since his Cavs days. So I don't hate watching him right now. I just don't like Kyrie in general, never have. Um, but oh God, I can't pick Jason Kidd. I can't. I can't do it. I'm Celtics win in seven. It's the grossest finals you've ever watched in your life. No one wants to remember it. It goes down as just an awful series. But can that happen in 7 games? I don't even know. Maybe it's like five and it's just gross. They're all terrible blowouts. Nobody wins a close game. No memorable moments. Everybody scores like 15 points a game. Nobody stands out. That's what I'm rooting for, but I guess I'm going Boston, but I really don't want to at all. I genuinely want Jason Kidd to succeed never, ever in his life again. I want nothing good for that man ever. Um, and I don't want anything good for the Celtics, but again, I can't hate Drew Holiday. I love Drew Holiday. So if he gets one, good for him. Hopefully he doesn't get another one, but it's not like he's preventing the Bucks from getting one right now. That's already done and gone. So I can live with it if it happens. like I said, this was probably my least favorite possibility for a finals that we could have possibly had. So this is, I don't even know if I'm going to watch a game. I'm not even kidding. I
I
might
have
just,
to. I have to.
I don't, we'll see. I'm sure I'm going to turn it on
It's like a car crash. You don't want to look, but you have to look.
as soon as
Um,
I see there's a close game in like the third quarter, I'm going to be like, all right, I'll turn it on. But I'm not going to watch full games for sure. There will be plenty of Brewer games to keep me occupied. Um, but
we
yeah, I
should
guess
mention though, with first before we go to that part, is if this was the Bucks versus the Mavericks, and because if people know how much we hate Jason Kidd, that would have been the most fiery. You put the adjective there, whatever one you want. It would have been a perfect finals. As far as high stakes goes, that would have been awesome to watch because it's if you win, it's the best feeling in the world, and if you lose, I just lost to Jason Kidd on the biggest stage. Um, and then of course Giannis, Luca. There's two good teams going at it too, but um, that would have been a lot of fun to watch, and just for Milwaukee fans in general.
yeah, raising the stakes on a final series is pretty hard to do, but that's about the easiest way to do it, I think, is to put the guy that I hate more than any other former Buck player or coach on the other side. Um, I always talked about how like a playoff game against Mike McCarthy for the Packers was going to feel like that. I still felt some of that when they played him in the playoffs. I would feel much, 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 much more hatred and just so much. I would hate it so much against Jason Kidd. And yeah, losing to him would just be terrible. So hopefully we don't have to worry about that at any point in the future. Um, but yeah, I guess to move on here, well, it looks like you had a question here, but you said a lot has been made of Boston's easy run to the finals based on injuries in the Eastern Conference. Does that diminish their run or potentially their title? Obviously, they could have here. I'll kick it off quickly. I have a very easy answer to this. No, it does not. Gunnar, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just seen a lot of this, and it's very hypocritical as Bucks fans to be saying this, and I can be realistic about it. We did cut some breaks when that Bucks run. Um, doesn't mean we didn't earn it. Doesn't mean we didn't deserve it. It's just happens. It's the NBA. It happens. Every single team has gone through it. Injury wise, they just cut the best break possible, maybe, but it's still fair. You play who you play, you beat who you beat. It's just whatever's in front of you, you have to beat them still. I hope the Mavericks stay healthy in that fact, just so they can play somebody and have because they're a good team. So
Yeah,
if they don't have the competition, they're going to win. They're already a good team. They're probably going to win anyways, if we're being completely honest too. They're the best team in the Eastern Conference. It's just they had nobody to counterpunch them whatsoever. So yeah, it's just not fair to be able to poke at them and take away their ring if they win it or diminish their run. I don't think a finals run doesn't really mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't mean much to that group, but it always does. But they really need a championship, so they got there. That probably means to us, I would be so happy if the Bucks got there and lost. I would take that right now. So I'm not even trying to diminish what they did, but I think they won. There was a stat where they've won the most games possible within like that core of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but haven't won a title. And it's just only getting worse if they don't win this season. So they really need to win a ring. So now they get to face a healthy team,
yeah,
hopefully, and we'll see what happens. But it's just not fair for Bucks
no.
fans or really any fans because you can nitpick any finals run ever in the history,
But
and
I
there's
was,
going to be an injury somewhere around
yes,
along there.
that's exactly where I was going. The Bucks played the Hawks somehow in their Eastern Conference Finals, which allowed them to win without Giannis. I'm not sure there's too many teams they would have beat without Giannis in that spot. Obviously, they got good contributions from a lot of people, but that's just how it goes. I mean, if you can find me, there's been very few runs through the gauntlet where you played good teams with all their best players the whole time and won the finals. Like it just doesn't happen. Somebody important gets hurt during the course of this playoff run, and it's just yes, the Celtics might have had a few more than usual, but I mean, the Bucks did have Kyrie and James Harden in that series go down. There's been plenty of injuries for any finals run you take. The Raptors year, obviously, you had KD go down in the finals, like and Klay Thompson. So
Hmm.
it's just always it takes some of that. That's what and you hear Bucks players talk about that. They say like it takes some injury luck to win a finals or just staying healthy is a big part of winning the finals. So um the Celtics have been mostly able to do that. They lost Porzingis for now. It sounds like there's a chance we'll see him in this series. So Yeah, we'll see, but I'm not going to diminish any championship. The only one I will somewhat hear out is the bubble because I think that was just completely different than everything else. But it wasn't
Hmm.
different for the teams there. They all were under the same circumstances. So the team that won still performed the best under the circumstances they were in. So no matter what, I think you win the finals, you win the finals. It's just pretty much as simple as that. I have nothing more to add on Jason Kidd other than I hope that he gets fired or um, why he would get fired, I don't know. Hopefully he did something illegal that's not like bad to someone else. Maybe they'll find coke in his locker or something and he gets fired for that. I don't know. Something that isn't dangerous to other people, but also enough to get him to lose his job. That would be the dream. Yeah, I hate him. I don't want to talk about him anymore. But if you'd like to, I will let you finish this off with a few more words if you want them.
I just want to make sure we give our due diligence with Jason Kidd because um, maybe how our friendship maybe started a little bit was hating over Jason Kidd because we
Yeah.
had such a passion to hate him. Um, I just don't know if I can put it into words how much I disliked him as a coach. Felt like the ultimate, just I don't know how to put it. What did we just have when the moon went over the sun? And I feel like that's what he was,
An
where he was
eclipse.
blocking an eclipse. Yes, that's what
Yeah.
it's called.
It was
Like
like
he
a
was,
potato covering our son. That was
yeah,
Giannis
like
and Chris. He was
yeah,
covering our son
sure,
with his potato looking head. He looks like an idiot with a potato for a head. And yeah, I want him. I hate
yeah,
him. This is the most there's no one I hate. I like short of maybe, just absolutely horrible people, but he's a bad person too. Not just a bad coach. He sucks
yes,
as a
yeah,
person. I will say, I guess I'm going to say something nice here. I do think he's a much better coach now than he was
hmm
as the Bucks coach, and that's not uncommon where somebody loses their job, gets another opportunity, learned a bunch of lessons. He obviously was a very smart basketball mind as a player, very, very good player. So I do think he's doing a good job, but like Gunnar said earlier, I also think they built a pretty perfect roster that would be kind of hard to mess up around Luca,
hmm
especially post deadline. I mean, before the deadline, it wasn't great, but after the deadline, they looked like they were in a very good spot. So that'll wrap up all of our discussion on him and everyone else that I hate. And we're going to move on to a couple people that I don't hate, and you might hate mine, but random Bucks. Gunnar, what do you got?
Uh, if you know this name, you probably were playing NBA Live, and he was just unbelievable at making threes in that game. That's what started my love for him. I think it was NBA Live 2005 was one of the best games ever. I had that one. I think that was the year, but he had a couple years with the Bucks. Eric Strickland, short guy, muscular, lefty, bald, much like Jason Kidd. We're
Yep.
staying on theme here. That's how we'll connect it. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much. I loved him more because of the game I was playing than I do remember him playing purple jersey Bucks. I think we had a playoff run. That might have been when we played the Pistons and we got one game randomly. Or maybe we got swept that year. It's 2004. I know we made the playoffs like under 500 record or something, but he wasn't one of those teams. Yeah, that's all I really remember from him. He was just nasty in NBA Live 2005.
Yeah, I went with our boy, flat ass John Henson. Stick figure. I mean, it's still my screensaver on my laptop is this stupid drawing I made of Bucks and Six with John Henson, side view John Henson, and it's just a stick figure. But he was, I actually enjoyed John Henson. I did not have any issue with him. Funny enough, he's like one of the all-time field goal percentage leaders for the Bucks all time. Even though he moved to the three-point line his final half season with the Bucks, shooting 35.5% on 2.2 attempts per game. Um, I don't want to say I called that, but I did tell people for like 4 years before that he could shoot threes if he wanted to, and I felt very, very much in the right when that happened. I felt like a genius. That was Bud. I'm convinced Bud could have made John Henson a fine player at the end of his career, but unfortunately, for all of us Flat S fans, he was moved in the deal to acquire George Hill, right? That was the deal. Him and Delhi
Yep.
for George Hill. Yeah.
hmm
And that worked out fine for the Bucks too, so no complaints on that. But I was a John Henson fan, big time. I mean, I wish he would have gotten stronger at some point. That was the main thing. He kind of was always the same strength wise, but the guy was averaging like almost 2 blocks a game when he played regularly, and he was uncoordinated, but more coordinated than Thon Maker. And Gunnar and I had some debates on those two for sure going back in the day. But yeah, that's mine. So Gunnar, if you have anything to add, we can do that, or we can wrap
Yeah,
this
I
up.
think he was probably the one guy who touched all the eras. Like he touched the Brandon Jennings
Yep.
era, he touched the Jason Kidd's era, and then the Bud era. So he
Yeah,
has encapsulated the 2010s for the
that's
Bucks.
true. That's true. John Henson, man of the 2010s for the Bucks. That's what we're saying. Um, all
Hero.
right, that'll do it. So please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod, and please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Go Bucks.